Okay, blue-white breakdown time. Bob Flounders, Dave Jones, Penn State at Northwestern, Evanston, Illinois. Early kick for the Lions and Northwestern, 11 a.m. out there. Dave, who are you picking this week?
You want to stick it to me some more? Is that what you're doing?
You always have an opinion that's outside the box a little. I just wonder.
Yeah, but we don't pick at the start of the show. You know that. You just want to stick it to me some more.
I wasn't sure. What you thought. Hey, they just had a big win. Am I right? They just had a big win over a pretty nice little program.
Hey, anything can happen in this league. Anything can happen. So, did you watch? You didn't watch the Minnesota ending?
I did not. I looked at the box score and I almost. It was like Medusa. I turned to stone and I couldn't believe. First of all, 21-0 to start, 31-10 in the fourth quarter, and they gave up. I guess the last touchdown with 2 seconds left, and
the entire tape is available on YouTube. So Lisa Byington is
Did you watch the whole game?
Friend, I watched a lot of the second half just to get the feel for where it was, and then I just talked to Louis Vacher and the inside NU guy, yesterday, and he was like setting the scene, but you can see it on the tape. There is nobody there. You remember when you didn't go to a football school. You went to Scranton, so they
didn't even have a football team.
You didn't go to a football school. The funny thing about football games like that are over and the home team is losing, and it's very obvious, is the last student fans who are there are the incoming freshmen because they don't have any place to go. They don't really have any friends yet. They've only been there 3 weeks. And they're usually the last ones hanging out because they don't have any plans.
They're also probably bombed and don't know how to get home.
Yeah. I mean, so they had this special run the field promotion for freshmen every year at Northwestern. You get to go down there and run the length of the field.
Like for puppies, you know what I mean?
Plus they're not really athletically inclined Northwestern students, and they're spastically running down the field.
What?
And this is great! Yay, sports! And then Louis said they all left like 10 minutes into the game to probably go study, and by the end of the game, he said there were like 3 rows of freshmen, like 18 people left in the stands because it was 31-10 Minnesota. They had just busted a big, long 42-yard run on a 4th and 1. By the way, Minnesota's back is Darius Taylor.
Yeah,
he is seriously good.
I heard.
He went right through Bryce Gallagher, Northwestern's middle linebacker, went through him and bounced through him and went to the end zone. Looks like the game is over. There's a countable crowd left in Ryan Field. There can't be more than 2,000 people there. And they start on this comeback. I mean, there was no reason they should have been able to come back from this game. No one believed in them, clearly. Even the freshmen had left. And they started on this comeback from 21 points down, and Ben Bryant, their transfer quarterback from Cincinnati.
He gets around, man. That guy gets around.
Via Eastern Michigan, where he won for Chris Creighton, and he won for Luke Fickell.
That's Eric Epler's alma mater, just as a shout-out, Eric Epler.
And he's used to winning, unlike the rest of these guys. And he just started flinging it around all over the place. And they've got this little tiny wideout named Bryce Kurtz, who they got A.J. Henning, too.
Yeah.
From Michigan, remember him? Yeah.
Yep.
And Kurtz caught like 215 yards worth of passes. And Minnesota, it was a classic story of Minnesota like switching the power off. And we got this. And then they didn't have it. And it goes into overtime, and Northwestern wins out of nowhere, 37-34. And the West is up for grabs. Minnesota was as
awful.
Good.
Just say it. It's awful.
It is awful. Minnesota was as good a guess to win that division as anyone. I mean, is Iowa better than they are? I don't know. Wisconsin's probably the best team, but I mean, this really hurts them. They already had the win over Nebraska in week 1, and it just kills them. And PJ Fleck after the game was just just disconsolate, just couldn't.
Yeah.
he made some faces where he was just looked like he was about to cry. It was like an
Yeah.
encounter session. It was
He's an intense
something.
guy, Dave. He's an intense guy. Do you think 5-7 wins the Big Ten West this year or no? On a tiebreaker?
Rich Scarcella mentioned you remember the sickly Smythe division in the NHL back in the 70s where nobody had a winning record, but somebody had to make the playoffs. It's kind of like that. But David Braun, their new head coach, their interim head coach who took over for Pat Fitzgerald, is a story in himself. I mean, the kid, he's 38. He's the youngest coach in the Big Ten, a lot like Pat was back in 2006 or whenever that was.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat, don't forget, was the second longest tenured coach in the Big Ten to Ferentz.
And now it is.
This has been one very continuous regime there. And all of a sudden, this kid who's never been a head coach at any level, has never even coached in FBS, is thrown into this role. He was at North Dakota State, grew up in Wisconsin, so he knows the Big Ten. And he's done an incredible job pulling together this bunch of mutts because they're not very good. I mean, they're just not. They're small and slow, and Northwestern's won one game in the Big Ten 3 of the last 4 years, and that's the talent they have. But he's done a hell of a job, and maybe he's the right choice to coach them going forward. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, something about the atmosphere out there, maybe it's the early start. Last year's Penn State team, it was at Beaver Stadium, rain game, 17-7. Didn't look great. I remember that 2005 game, Dave, where Penn State won the Big Ten. They were in deep water against the Northwestern team that was just, I mean, they had some players, but they had to really come back to win that game 34-29. I think it was
that quarterback's an NFL coach, isn't he now, the assistant?
He might be. I get Northwestern quarterbacks confused with Wisconsin quarterbacks because they're all kind of the same guy, and they make plays, and then there's other games where they stink. So I do remember about that game though, Dave. Penn State needed to convert a 4th and 15, and then they found the touchdown pass to Derek Williams. But Northwestern's offense they were hard to stop. They just had to keep settling for field goals. And that was the kind of game where, if you're not really, really focused, they're going to hang around. I don't know that that's going to be a problem with this Penn State team, but Northwestern will give it their best shot. They definitely will, and you just don't know.
That's the takeaway from that Minnesota game. I mean, nobody believed that these guys could do it except them. That's a cliche that you hear players and coaches saying, no one believed it. But this is absolutely true. I mean, these people they're not serious football fans. They were going home to get wine and soda and brie, nice brie tray.
Oh man.
And talk about politics.
Fired.
Yeah, and that's what they're into. They go to the game as kind of a little thing to do on Saturday. And they're still building that giant stadium. I mean, it's not a giant stadium, but it's a really nice stadium.
Yeah.
They're completely redoing Ryan Field because they have a very generous benefactor in Pat Ryan, so he's still on board, and I guess they're still going to do it, but. It's really an outlier in the Big Ten. They can't get in the kids that other schools can academically. And these days, man, your donors better step up with NIL and just pay them. David Shaw quit at Stanford because this age just got so difficult for him to get transfers in. That's another thing. I mean, it's really tough with the portal to do at Northwestern or Vanderbilt or Stanford what other schools do because the academic standards are so they won't take the credits of other schools, and the people in the administrations just won't budge. These are private schools, so that's the real challenge. I don't know how you surmount it, but David Braun is a really impressive kid. I saw him on with Dave Revson and Wani, the dichotomy between Wani, the Pittsburgh guy, saying, "I want to know how you did it. How'd you do it?" and David Braun, who's
he's got one hell of a mustache, Wani. That thing is just
is there any
like an overstuffed caterpillar that's just attached and it's moving as he talks.
It's invading your personal space.
Former Cowboys defensive coordinator on the '92 Super Bowl team, but shout out that
he's straight Baldwin, man. That guy, he's straight out of the Berg.
Dave, so just real quick, you mentioned Northwestern. From the Penn State fan perspective, I think that, for a lot of Penn State fans, you look at that game every year when it's out there, and it's not a marquee game, but I think it's a marquee place to go.
Yeah.
I'm curious how I think it should be a nice representation of Penn State fans for a lot of reasons. It's really affordable if you're on the East Coast to get to Chicago, and Evanston is right by the airport. It's going to be an early start. I mean, if you make it, you get in there a day early at this time of year, the weather's going to be nice enough. I just think, there's very few places I think I would rather visit than maybe that area for a Big Ten game, regardless of the result. I wonder how many Penn State fans are going to go, because they're going to have the run of the stadium, and there's only 40,000 people that can cram in there, but I would expect there'll be a lot of Penn State fans.
Yeah, there's Penn State fans are pretty football centric, but I think they're a little more eclectic than, say, Ohio State fans. They're more like Michigan fans, Penn State fans. Like, they'll go to a venue if they think they could have a little fun and, maybe get some culture. Those are the Michigan fans, not the Penn State. But you remember when I told you when you got on the beat in 2002 that the one place you had to go was Chicago?
I know.
And now
it's like killing me. These 11 a.m. kicks are killing me, Dave. They're killing me.
You're killing me. You're killing me. They're killing me, Whitey.
Get in early enough that the day before, but 11 a.m. Joe Herman's going to want to be at that stadium at 4:30 in the morning.
Really get up there by 4:30.
So, but it really is a great trip if you're a fan, because Evanston is not far from downtown Chicago. Evanston in itself is a fun place. I just think, there's only a couple of places I would choose over maybe that trip, especially at this time of year. If it was in November, I'd say, I don't know, maybe don't freeze to death. But this is a good trip, and I hope that there's a lot of Penn State fans out there.
I ranked the Big Ten venues, the Big Ten road trips.
And
I don't know, probably 5 years ago, I did when we were doing listicles.
Yeah, you had Purdue 1, Rutgers 2, right? Indiana 3.
And people didn't understand the concept, and they started mocking me. Right. And it was the most and least fun road trips in the Big Ten. This is what I named it by someone who's done them a lot. And
nice tight headline. I love it. Go ahead.
And I've done them a lot. Mm-hmm. And I ranked Northwestern second because of Chicago, but not only because of Chicago, but because that little neighborhood around the stadium's set in a neighborhood, and you're not
Mustard's Last Stand.
Mustard's Last Stand is probably the best junk food place in the Big Ten.
So let's tell the fans, if they're going to go to the game, that where to go, what to expect, and it's really a very authentic, original spot that you really don't find in a lot of college football stadiums.
No, what would you say?
It's like stadium. It's like in the parking lot.
Yeah, it's in the parking lot of the stadium, which makes it real convenient.
Mustards.
But it's not really about the game day atmosphere there per se. It's kind of like, because Northwestern's a private school. But if you're going to suggest any Big Ten weekend, it's got to be one of the first places you'd list, because there's lots of walking area on what is the name of that street? I can't think of the main drag.
Yeah,
I mean, you walk like 2 blocks from the stadium, and it's this nice leafy neighborhood. You could just, if you get a giant sausage sandwich with brown mustard, or 2 or 5. As I've done at Mustard's Last Stand, in the morning, and you get yourself a coffee, and it's typical Chicago weather. It's a little chilly, maybe cloudy, and you take a walk afterward. You can walk for like 15 blocks without. It's like in a neighborhood. It's a lot like right next to Beaver Stadium where Joe Paterno used to live around in there. I mean, it's right there. And that isn't true of a lot of places in the Big Ten. It's not true. Certainly not true at Ohio State. I guess Iowa, it's a lot like Iowa. My favorite trip in the Big Ten is Wisconsin and then Northwestern right after it. I'm sorry I'm not going to this one because I love Chicago and I love that venue. And then, like you said, you go in the stadium and you can have the run of it if you're a Penn State fan because they just don't care that much. It's like Ohio State fans driving out to Bloomington and they take over Memorial Stadium. They do it every year. It's a home game. So considering the flight, the problem is that Penn State fans used to drive to places like this. And if you could drive to Evanston, that would be like ideal. So people don't want to fly these days, but it is a cheap flight to Chicago. It's a great trip.
Dave, tell me if this is accurate. So for older Penn State fans who are listening or watching this, I think how you described the Evanston area around Ryan Field is spot on. I think the time of year is great. Early fall. It's almost like, and I think I'm right about this, it's almost like Faber College without the Deltas and John Belushi. It's actually very nice and scenic. It was just that fraternity and the Deathmobile just kind of ruined things for the nice, polite kids. But the rest of it was fantastic. Am I right?
And there's no rule that you can't go to Wrigleyville or Clark Street or all the other places. Wrigleyville. Or all the other places, or Lincoln Park,
mass
transit you can go to in Chicago. There's no rule against that. Oh, we got a visitor. I'm sorry.
All right.
He's interested in what you're saying, Bob.
Speaking of the Deltas, that's the German Shepherd version. He would be a Delta if he was at Faber College.
He'd really like to have some breakfast. If
Kaiser Jones making an appearance on the podcast. Little yawn there.
Well, I guess we should mention Ben Bryant, their transfer quarterback, a little more, because their coordinator has kind of been conservative, I guess, because they're trying to get their footing and they've got to stay in games and shorten games. And he's running the ball a lot, but I think they could be in just what the hell mode at this point. And why not? So Mike Bajakian, who was an NFL quarterback coach somewhere, where was he? Remember that?
How do you spell that last name? I bet you can't.
B-A-J-A-K. It's Bajakian. It's Lebanese, right? Lebanese? Is that what that is?
I don't know.
Kaiser's got an itchy ear, and he's gonna start groaning if I don't scratch it for him.
Yeah. He's gonna groan either way, but sure.
He's gonna do that thing where dogs start going like this, and they go.
Oh yeah. Hey, so Northwestern is just they're gonna be in almost every game. They're out athleted, but with the scheme, the time of day, here's my thing about this Penn State team is this would be a game where you would say, hey, they put a lot in to that whiteout game. They really, really wanted to put it to the Hawkeyes. They're getting a lot of credit for how well they played, especially and deservedly so. But the problem with Penn State maybe taking their foot off the gas this year is that their second team is so good that I think other than a few players, Penn State's got a lot of options. If somebody is not bringing their A game, they can just turn to their third or fourth safety, or they could put in a couple other offensive linemen, or their third tight end, or, they got Trey Potts in the backfield, who has the number 3 option as a running back, is kind of a nightmare. So I don't know, I just think that it's going to be tough for Penn State to get caught off guard because the coaching staff just can put other players in if they're not happy with the way things are going.
And that's a dynamic. That's a really good point because that is a dynamic on every team with depth. Right. If you're not going to do the job, someone's there to
someone's dying to do the job for you.
Not only take over, but take your job maybe. I mean,
I think that is what's really hard. It's really hard for a team that's going up against Penn State, maybe in a vulnerable position, is you better be careful because you get the first team out of the game. Now you got a really motivated second team that's trying to get the coaching staff's attention.
Now, there is, if you look at the manpower discrepancy in this game, there is absolutely no way Penn State should lose the game, whether it's an emotional hammock game or not. Northwestern's defense, especially, they can't stop the run. They're small and slow by Big Ten standards, and their two best players are a couple of plugger inside linebackers, Xander Mueller, who I saw. I'm telling you, it's probably the best blitz pickup I've seen in years.
And he was the one getting picked up.
And Mueller was the one getting picked up, unfortunately. And Kyle Monangai in the opener for both teams. I don't know if you've seen Monangai, but I
remember him. I remember he's played against Penn State.
Yeah, he's gotten better. He's gotten stronger. Mm-hmm. And Michigan swamped him because they're Michigan and they can't block Michigan last week. But he's had 2 or 3 really good games in a row. And I know how much you like running backs who pick up blitzes.
Yeah.
This was
I stay on the field.
This wasn't just a pickup. I mean, Xander Mueller came in there as fast as he's capable, and Monangai met him and drove him back. It was a pancake pickup block, which I don't know that I've ever seen. He drove him back onto his back, and then he blocked him again on a touchdown going in the end zone for Gavin Wimsatt, their quarterback. So what I'm getting at is that Gallagher and Mueller, while they're pluggers and they're really good functional players, they're just not quick enough or fast enough to handle a team with athletes like Penn State. And they haven't defended the run at all. So this looks like a bad matchup as far as the rosters in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the line, I checked it today. It opened like closer to 3 touchdowns, and then it shot up to 26 pretty quickly. I think it's at 27 now. It certainly feels right to me. I would just say that Penn State has a couple of things they need to work on. One of them is there's no way to sugarcoat it. I'm not quite sure what the deal is with Nicholas Singleton right now. He just everyone just associates that first year as if he was like that as a freshman, what's he going to be like in 2023? But the other side of that, Dave, is that teams and defensive coordinators, they've had a chance to look at him and what he does best and what he doesn't do best, and the big play element has just been missing from his game. And after 4 games, especially the last 3 against teams that, Illinois was a good defense, but, Delaware and, Iowa got worn out, but they still didn't give up many long gains. I don't know he's almost become more valuable in the passing game because they can get him the ball in space. But I think right now, Katron is the better option in a lot of areas. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what, but I don't know if we're going to see I don't know if we're going to see the breakout month from him. I think he's certainly talented enough to do it, but a lot of those carries of 2 and 3 yards, they get in bad spots on offense when they can't get 5 or 6 yards of carry with those guys.
I think Allen, and I think you do too, is more built for power running, inside zone running, and he showed it against Iowa. He's shown it this season. Singleton reminds me right now. You remember the way he was early last season? He hit a couple big runs, and then it didn't look like he wanted to hit holes too badly. Like he wasn't real comfortable running inside, and then he turned it around kind of in mid-season, and he was really slamming into holes. And he changed. He reminds me right now, I don't know if you've watched Michigan, but Donovan Edwards as a changeup back is not doing well either. He's doing the same thing, kind of hesitating at the line, where Blake Corum has no problem running inside. Donovan Edwards only has like 110 yards this year in all this action, and he's only averaging about 2.8 or 3 yards a carry, and he just doesn't look too eager to stick his nose in there. And it's hard, man. It's a tough job. Maybe you want to pace yourself for the big games. I don't know if you can do that, but he does have help.
Hmm.
So maybe he just doesn't want to get beat up and save himself for Ohio State. Maybe he can do it. I'm not sure, but he doesn't look just like the same guy we saw at the end of last season. You're right.
Yeah, and I think you almost try and do too much after you've had a big year, and you're thinking too much. You're trying to make every gain, 15 or 20 yards. Where if you're going to run north south, you remember Terrell Davis with the Broncos. His offense, Shanahan's offense, was, hey, it's one cut and go. That's it. You're not making two or three cuts. You're going to get up the field. If you're not going to do that, we're going to bring in the backup and the guy behind him. And it's a very simple style, but you can't you cannot think too much about it. You just have to
Well,
your first instinct and go. And
it,
I think
it's
that's what maybe Nicholas can do well. It's when you try and bounce a play when the hole isn't maybe where you wanted it to be. And there is I think a skill to that. And I think Katron is a little bit more advanced right now. And I when Nick is at his best, he sees the opening, doesn't hesitate, he accelerates, and once he gets in the clear, it's tough to catch him. But it's seeing the hole and hitting it. I think I'd like to see him maybe do that a little bit better.
well, it's easy for us to say to hit
Yeah,
the hole because when you get
right,
southbound real fast and then you get hit,
right.
you remember that. I think Katron Allen's a little bit better built to handle that physically than Nicholas Singleton is. But I'm curious what you think about the wideout situation because they didn't go deep at all against Iowa. They didn't
Hmm.
need to. They didn't hit a pass longer than 14 yards, I don't think, the entire game. They never went deep. And that's okay, but I don't know if they have a guy who can take a top of a defense in this team unless Malik McLean starts getting some touches and some targets. Lambert Smith, I don't think Lambert Smith's the number one receiver. I don't think they have one. And that is more worrisome to me than anything else.
The last two games, so James talked about it. The Iowa corners played well off
Yeah,
the Penn State. They did,
they're going
and
to take what they give them.
they never really got away from that. In the Illinois game, Illinois for a lot of plays, they had a safety at least 20 yards deep. These are not excuses, but I think Penn State's at the point where they know that they just need to do what is there with this defense to win the game. I don't think they're going to force anything down the field. To your point, I think other than Keandre, there isn't really a true deep threat that scares another team. I think Harrison Wallace can help, but he's more of a guy that can be a contested catch down the field jump ball guy. I think they're going to get better, but I'm trying to think in my Dave. I don't even know that Drew. I think he's maybe even tried a deep pass maybe 3 or 4 times this whole season. And James doesn't sound worried about it. But, when the waters get deeper, when they have to face some defenses where they're going to need it, it's easy to go when you have 97 snaps against Iowa. It's easy to be patient, right? Because you could see them being gassed. But when the other guy can score 20 or 30 points in a game and you're down, can you really afford to be patient and try and grind it out in a 15-play drive? At some point, they're going to have to stretch the field, and I think that is a component that's been missing. And I want to see if this is going to be the same all year, or there's going to be some explosive plays. I also, Dave, I don't think it helps that teams are they're not getting a lot. They're not making any big gains on the ground. So I think if you're a team, let them go 15 plays in 85 yards in 15 plays and see if they mess up. Because why would you even allow them to throw deep?
Yeah, and I think they respect Aller. I mean, any DC can look
Yeah.
at Aller and what he can do, and he's going to say, play off.
Yeah.
Let him have the underneath stuff.
Because he can certainly air it out, and I
Yeah.
mean, you got to make him work for it, and hope for some penalties, help for some negative plays in the running game. And I think it's a little of both. I think it's they are looking for another receiver to step up, but I also think I don't want to say the running game is underwhelmed, but it's just not the same. It's not the same running game that we saw last year, and it's given the offensive line, I don't think is the problem. I think they have a pretty good tight end room, so at some point, and I'll tell you what, Dave, if they can't get on tracks against this Northwestern front, I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be any getting on track for the rest of the year. I think it's just going to be slow and steady. I think that's
it's a no-win situation, because if they do, everyone's going to say, "Well, it's Northwestern. What does it mean?" But still, it's useful to do it.
Yeah, and I think it would do wonders for maybe their confidence of a guy like Singleton. I think he needs to know that he could still be that presence, even if it's against Northwestern, because he had the big runs against Ohio in week 2, and you're like, well, it was Ohio. And then he did the same thing at Auburn. And I don't know, maybe he got a lift from that, but you just have not seen anything really that close to the 2022 version.
I just wonder what's going to happen. Illinois is one thing. Iowa's another thing. These are not defenses, not this year with Illinois, that can do anything but what they did. They've got a playoff. Ohio State does not have to. They've got a really, really good secondary.
Yeah.
And they're a defense a lot like Penn State's, in that they're really fast. I don't know if they can handle Michigan up the gut, and I don't know if Penn State can either, for that matter. I think you're a little bit more optimistic about that than I am. But Ohio State can press and coverage. They can get up on you and say, can you go deep on us? Can you go across the middle on us? Because their secondary is of Penn State's caliber. They're really, really good. I don't know if you watched the Notre Dame game, but man, what you can do against Ohio State is, I think, is gash them. Notre Dame did. I don't think their defensive front is all that great. And I know we're kind of discounting Northwestern, but I mean, what do we got here? Northwestern, a bye week in Massachusetts. We might as well start looking at Ohio State, because this is the game they need. And I think Ohio State is vulnerable, and I think they can beat them even in the shoe. I've predicted that they're going to win. I just think they need to get their deep threats in order. And I would love to see Malik McClain. I don't think Dante Cephas is that guy. He's a possession receiver. I'd love to see Malik McClain catch a long ball or 2 or 4 in this game.
I think since we talked a little bit about what's not necessarily gelling for Ohio State's offense, I want to go back to something that really surfaced in the Iowa game that I think will serve Penn State well the rest of the way, but especially in the Ohio State and Michigan games. You look at the games that they've lost a bunch of them against Ohio State and Michigan. But one thing that's always kind of stuck out to me is, Penn State in short yardage situations, whether it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, or it's 4th and a long 2, I don't remember them either trying to go for it on 4th down or actually getting the 3rd and 3. They've not been very good in short yardage. And even though the running game isn't great, that 4th down play that they have now, I think it's a difference maker, because I don't know that it's easy to stop 4th and 1 when the quarterback's 6'5", 240, and he's getting that push from a 260-pound tight end. And Dave, it extends drives. It keeps the other guy off the field. It wears out the other defense, and it allows Penn State to they don't really have to trust the shaky kicking game if they're going to get long drives that result in touchdowns. If they can get into a 4th and 1 or 3rd and 2, they are much better equipped to convert short yardage situations. And I thought, especially against Michigan, out in Michigan when they get walloped, they never could get a lead in those games. They're always playing from behind, and they never force Michigan to have to do what they don't want to do, which is probably throw the ball. And even against Ohio State. So you keep the Ohio State offense off the field. You force Michigan's offense to throw the ball if you can get a lead in those games. And I think if you look at what they're doing on 3rd and 4th down, the short yardage stuff, I think, is definitely working in Penn State's favor. And that's one thing I think that's been a bright spot as this season's unfolded.
And I think they're the one team of the big 3 that might be in the best shape of all of them. In that regard, I don't think Michigan is quite the defensive front that they've been. I haven't seen like an overpowering defensive front there. They're good. They're really good, but they don't look as fearsome as they have before. And Ohio State's defense, while they're really fast, and I think they're really good overall, I don't think they're any different up front either. This is the year when Penn State can get them, and this is also the year where you remember under Moorhead. I mean, they didn't even go under center.
Yeah,
You remember
and
that?
it hurt them in short yardage.
Yeah,
badly, very
they
badly.
didn't. They had a little quarterback, and they didn't have Barkley. While he's can do a lot of things, he wasn't a power back that you could run out of that set. So I think arguably Katron Allen might be a better power back than even Barkley was. Would you say that or not?
Yeah, and it was the whole not under center, and the mesh point was if he just delayed it a little bit, the guy's waiting for Barkley, 3 yards in the backfield. He literally on a lot of plays never ever had a chance to get.
There were very important moments in that 2017 Ohio State game at the Shoe.
Yep,
where if they could have done that, if they could have converted 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, they win the game. They've got a better offensive line now than they did then. I don't know if it's considerably better, but it's certainly better than that line or better than any line they've had so far, where they got overwhelmed at Michigan the last couple trips in there. This is not that anymore. So they can hope to make those plays. I wonder if they're good enough in the interior to get those 4th and 1s. If they're not, if it's like 4th and 2, then they got a problem.
Right.
So we will see.
All right, it's pick time. We're about 36 minutes in. I know your puppy's hungry and he needs attention. What's the pick?
In honor of did you notice that the 25-11 game was
the Eagles game? Bucks, yeah.
Have you heard of scoregami?
Oh no! I know you told me about this. Was that one of those scores?
It had never been done in the NFL.
So what are we down to? Like, how many scores are left?
Oh, there's many scoregamis, but they all involve 11 or 20, 18 or 25 or 4, of course.
Scoregami is a final score that's never happened before in the NFL, right? Is that
25-11, which
that never happened.
Like a modest score. It's not crazy like 70-20. Well, they had 2 scoregamis in one day in the NFL. Yeah.
You're going to scoregami this game?
I'm going to scoregami this game. I'm going to call it 39-2, Penn State. And I don't know how it's going to happen, but 39-2. Because I just
scoregami the game too.
Well, maybe it's a bad snap on a punt. Yeah, something like that.
All right, 39-2. So under and Penn State covers. I have it 38-10 Penn State, and I'm just really curious to see. Honestly, Penn State, especially the running game needs to get some juice. Like it's one thing if at the end of the game they've run it 50 times for 260 yards. That looks great as a stat, but they don't have neither Singleton or Allen has a run of 20 or more yards. These guys need to kind of get synced up. They need to have a little success because, as you said, it's not about, they got a bye week and then they got UMass. It's not about that. Late October and November, that could get a little tricky for this Penn State offense as it gets colder, and they need to get the big play back in the running game. I hope both those guys can kind of get comfortable. I think they should both go over 100 yards, Dave. I don't know if they will, but there's no reason they shouldn't. I got it 38-10 Penn State.
That running game needs juiced. Say it like Mid-State Man.
Right. Somewhere out there is like 15 guys in Pennsylvania that sound exactly like that. And I don't know if they know we're talking about them.
They never know. So have a good trip out to Chicago. I'm not making this one either. I made that deal with Des Moines in March. So have a great time. I know you love Chicago.
All right. Thanks, man.